Hi students, Professor Laney here with Chapter 9. We're a little bit out of sequence with the book, but I put these in the unit together because they tend to kind of go together. We talked last week about learning disabilities, and sometimes there's an overlap between learning disabilities and intellectual disabilities. So we're out of order with the book, but I think this makes up a really good unit too. So again, here's our class, and we are in Unit 2. So we did speech and language, learning disabilities, and now we're going to talk about intellectual disabilities. This particular topic is very near and dear to me. I grew up with somebody in my home and my family who had intellectual disabilities. My dad's sister had Down syndrome, and I didn't even know what that was. I mean, I grew up with it. It was just a person in our family, and I think it wasn't until I was about 10 years old that he knew that I was growing up, but she wasn't. Meaning she had kind of the mental capacity of about an 8-year-old. And I realized at about 10 years old, I was like, oh, she's my auntie, but she's not, she's older than me, but she doesn't act older than me. So if you have an experience like this in your family, again, it's normal. And so it's really interesting. I've gotten a really interesting bird's eye view, especially because she was born in the 60s. And things have changed a lot, and it really is part of who I am as a person. Having somebody in my family like that really helped me who I am today and doing the work that I do today. And I was really pleasantly surprised to have somebody in my traditional class a few summers ago who actually worked with her before she passed away. And she's actually on a poster in her office because my auntie, she was very unique, and she had quite a very special personality, and she was mild to moderate intellectual functioning, but um, she had a huge personality, and so people who met her never forgot her because she just uh, we call her, in my family, my maiden name is Merzweiler, and we'd say she's all Merzweiler, piss and vinegar and stubborn and, you know, that kind of situation. But super fun, always happy. And she had these special gifts that she could, if she met you one time, she would ask you your birthday and she would never forget it. I mean, like a friend that she just met, like in passing, even a friend of a friend, she just locked that in forever, which was really good. So it really helped me understand that even though intellectual functioning was a little bit low and her need for supports was very high, she had these gifts that I can't even replicate everybody's birthday. I can't even remember mine sometimes. Okay. So keep that in mind going forward. This might be something that touches you or your family. And again, I have a very special place in my heart for these students or these people with intellectual disabilities. So we're going to have these common characteristics. The number one thing is impaired cognitive functioning, and it doesn't mean that they can't think. They just don't have the full capacity to um, learn things or know things just like typical learners. So maybe they know certain things, but they don't know everything, or they can learn math, they just can't learn all the math, that kind of situation. And then this group will talk about levels of supports, and some of them need a lot of support, like every single day, like to help get dressed and help get showered and things like that, help to be fed. And some of them live independently and work independently. So again, this group is very different in that way, but there's a lot of similarities, right? And then always, again, use the people first language. This is a student with, or this is a person with, right? There's still a lot of challenges in this group. It's kind of the most common group. It's not the highest prevalence, but it's the most common group. I think in our society we see these types of students or people. We can see them with our eyes. They have a look, and we'll talk about different ones. But there's a thing that we can see, and I think, and again, my experience is that they've been in my life, my whole life. But we can see these students out in the public and with their families and things like that. So I think there's a common a familiarity there. So it's not anything new or like something like autism that's a little bit more prevalent and more new and people you can't really see it and things like that. But this group is pretty obvious once you see them. And we're still pushing for parity or equal rights, and so there's a lot of challenges here, and I want to share this one with you. Thank you, so sweet. Hoosier. I love it. I love it. That's awesome. That's awesome. Let's see. Do you see that personality, that Spitfire? Oh, it's slowing down. Wow. Wow. Exactly. How many times have we said that to each other? Oh gosh. That's a very similar body style. Oh, it's gonna repeat your. Oh, so sweet. So, so sweet. Yeah, it just pulls at my heartstrings. They're just a very special group of people. And you know what? They have every rights just like we do. And I'm really, really proud that that's a part of my story. Yeah, I really, and I'm glad that the chapter included this video because why should we assume that they're more different? No, we're more alike. This is the seal I found from the President's Committee of People with Intellectual Disabilities. The introduction actually talks about Lauren Potter, who was on Glee, and this one on our page here. Excuse me. And she's actually on this committee, which is kind of nice because I really appreciate that the president knows that there's more work to be done here, right? I really was happy that they had a character who had Down syndrome on the show, except for I was a little upset with the way they portrayed the character. She was kind of a mean girl, and I didn't really like that. So I thought that was kind of interesting because she was kind of mean, and that is not how I know people with disability, intellectual disabilities. Incidentally, she lives in Irvine, and later in the chapter we'll show a video of her talking about being bullied. So yeah, she's a local girl. So I just wanted to share that with you. But yeah, the president takes this very, very seriously too. So in every chapter we start with intellectual disabilities described, and the definition here, it really think of it in a few ways. The levels of IQ or cognition, and the deficits of skills, and then the need for supports. And so there's the chapter really kind of hammers down the three areas, the three descriptive areas, the three areas of need, the three areas of deficits here. So again, intellectual disabilities are characterized by impaired intellectual functioning, which is limited adaptive behaviors, need for supports, okay? And the initial occurrence happens before 18. If it happens after 18, if there's a diagnosis of intellectual disabilities after the age of 18, it's something else. It's either a stroke or traumatic brain injury or something like that. So, or a tumor or something like that. So we'll talk about that later. But again, intellectual disabilities starts definitely before the age of 18. This is the IDEA definition. It's significantly sub-average general intellectual functioning existing concurrently with deficits in adaptive behavior and manifested during the developmental period that adversely affects a child's educational performance. So again, during the school years. And remember, cognition just means thinking. Now, again, there's three distinct areas: intellectual functioning, adaptive behavior, and need for support. So here's our intellectual functioning. Typically 2 or more standard deviations below IQ. I'll show you what that means in a second. It's a very technical term, but it doesn't have to be. Adaptive behavior, conceptual, social, and practical, and we'll talk about the lack of adaptive behavior. It's a little bit more flexibility, but it's also the skills that we need to exist in life and needs for supports, usually long term, and sometimes they could be a lot of supports or minimal supports, but it's usually through the course of their life. So this is the bell curve. We can use this to measure anything, but in this regard, it's IQ. So I think we talked about this before, but the average IQ is 100. Okay, some people are a little bit more, some people are a little bit less, but most people are within one standard deviation. This line means like a grouping or a percentage. Okay, so most people are here. See, the 68% is most people. Some people are a little bit higher, some people are a little bit lower. Okay, so 68% of people score within 15 points above or below 100. So that means 85 to 115. So that's like 70% of the population. That's if you're out hanging out with 10 of your friends, 10 of you, 7 of you are in here. Couple are here, couple are here. That's just how it works. Now, the rest of society, like everybody grouped together, 96% of people are between the IQ of 70 and 130. That's almost every single person. This last 4% lives here, and this 2%, and this 2%. So this right here is low genius, okay? Einstein was about 160, okay? And over here, okay, if we went way down here, this is really, really low. So our intellectual disabilities is going to happen in these. Remember, it says 1 to 2 standard deviations. So 85 is the highest that you could have your IQ that you would be considered mildly intellectually disabled. So those students are going to fall in between here. You could have mild in this area, and then it's going to get more profound, more serious down in that way. Okay. So I like that bell curve there. Again, the intellectual functioning is cognitive abilities, and cognitive abilities is thinking. Adaptive behavior is those life skills. It's almost like it's hard for people who have adaptive skills to really describe adaptive skills. Adaptive skills have to do with flexibility, but it also has to do with sequencing. Like if you put something in the washing machine, you have to put the soap in, you have to put the fabric softener, and then you have to move it to the dryer, right? And then at the end, you have to get it out before it wrinkles, right? Though that sequencing or those thoughts don't always come to this group of people. It could be everything like, I want a burger, so I walked to McDonald's, and yes, I walked there just fine, but I gave them $20 for a burger and I didn't stick around for my change. So things like that. And we'll talk about more specific skills there. Here, conceptual, again, money concepts. It's like when kids are little and they don't have an intellectual disability. They might have $1, but if you give them 3 quarters, hey, I'll trade you 3 quarters for $1. They're like, yeah, I got 3 things now, not just the one. So their intellectual functioning is just getting started. Imagine an adult who's going to get duped like that. Those are the kind of the things those are the skills that they're lacking. Again, some of the social skills are walking when it's a green light, obeying laws, responsibility, things like that, interpersonal communication. Sometimes these things are lacking here as well. And then these practical skills. This is like I said with the washing machine here, occupational skills or life skills or safety or self-help. Like being able to call 911. Things like that. Over here, being able to take a message. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. So some of the students are going to have just a tiny bit of impairments right in here. And some of them will have impairments in one area or two areas or maybe all of them. And it's really big. So it really just depends on the student. Again, just like speech and language, just like learning disabilities, it depends on that student and how they function and their needs. And so every student is different. That's why people first language is important, and that's why getting to know each student separately is important. Now, again, those needs for supports, it could be every day a little bit, it could be every day a lot, or it could just be sporadic, intermittent. So again, and where somebody gets those supports is going to be indicative of how impaired that person is, okay? So let's see what we have here. Types of intellectual disabilities. Now, there's lots of different types, but the book really focuses on just a few. Again, this is an intro course, and you can get more as we go. But again, I want to give you guys an idea of what's out there. And again, we talk about the severity or where these intellectual disabilities come from. So the causation and severity is really how you can look at it, how it was caused and how severe it is. So it could be caused environmentally, or it could be caused genetically, and it could be mild, moderate, or severe. So it's kind of a combination, and again, it depends on the student. Yes, again, here's our severity, mild. Mild intellectual disability is about 95%. And this is in our book. So 95% of the people with intellectual disabilities are going to be mild, right? So they're going to be close to that 85 IQ range, okay? Maybe between 80, right? Moderate is going to be a little severe, profound. Severe and profound, you're going to have, these are going to be nonverbal students who may not even be able to walk. So you're going to get, kids in wheelchairs and things here. So you're going to get these types of students. You're going to see these in a public school or a classroom. Okay. Causation, a third is unknown. We don't know where it comes from. Okay. But genetics is genetics. Now we can trace markers of genes, but sometimes genetics just happen, right? So genetically, Down syndrome and Fragile X, those are something that can be tested genetically. And then environmental is fetal alcohol syndrome or fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, heartbreaking, right? So genetic, can't really control. It's going to show up. That's how life is. Environmental, absolutely 100% preventable. Okay, so this is great. I'm glad that the chapter included this. What causes, and I really like how it's a genetic little piece here. Dun, dun, dun. It's 107. It's a review. It's like measles. It's just an actress. It's just an actress. It's heartbreaking. Heartbreaking, these kids. Ah, makes me sad. Oh, baby. So when you take 220 child as victim, I teach that one as well. We talk about shaken baby syndrome. We talk about child abuse, Munchausen's by proxy, where parents mistreat their children on purpose for their own attention. It's heartbreaking. And just to go back to the little guy in the hospital, my son was 3 pounds, and we don't know what he was exposed to before he was when his birth mom was pregnant with him. So we're we don't we don't think it's fetal alcohol syndrome, but he does have the look a little bit, and we'll talk about that later. Thankfully, his cognition is average or above average, but the behavior pieces are there. So we'll talk more about that too. It's heartbreaking. It gives me the chills. Those are all common in our society right now. You can get those. Oop, 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 oop. It's possible. Yep. Again, things that we can't control. I really like that video. I mean, I think that it really does a good job of talking about all the different possibilities or the way that we categorize. Okay, so I know this is a little bit hard to see, but I wanted to talk to you about the mild, moderate, severe, and profound. Again, your IQ in this level is going to be between 55 to 70, maybe up to 80. Okay. Um, Again, there's kids who can be undiagnosed at 80-ish or 75-ish. So just be aware. Let's see, moderate is 35 to 40, all the way up to 50 to 55. And again, you're going to have maybe somebody that you've seen in the videos before, the ones that said we're more alike than different. We saw mild to moderates in there. And then the IQ level of 20 to all the way up to 40, and then below 20. Yeah, again, this is severe and profound. Yeah. And we'll talk about those functioning levels as well. Hold on. Oh, sorry, let me go back. Fragile X, the most common inherited reason for intellectual disabilities. This is new for me. Again, my experience is that Down syndrome is very common because I lived with it. But Fragile X is actually very, very common, and most people don't even know what it is or even test for it because it looks a lot like autism, and we'll talk about that in the autism chapter as well. But it's really interesting. And again, Down syndrome, another chromosomal disorder. And FAS and FASD, heartbreaking. I have a video that I show in my traditional classes, and I did not include it in here. It is heartbreaking. So I put a little side note here. Again, this is what that video was talking about. There's known causes and unknown causes. So for known causes, we can tell that there's genetic and non-genetic causes. So genetic and maybe environmental. So this chapter talks about Down syndrome and Fragile X. When we get to other chapters, we'll talk about Rett syndrome. Okay. Now, non-genetic causes, which is environmental, right? It's not in your genes. It comes from outside. Okay. Fetal alcohol syndrome comes from the environment, comes from outside. Teratogenic causes is like a toxin, like you said, mercury, and then infections like meningitis and other. Um, Again, I had a friend of mine whose uncle got meningitis in his 30s, and he came out intellectually disabled. He didn't die because it's very common that you can die. But then there's also environmental issues here like a head injury. So we'll talk about that under TBI, traumatic brain injury, under physical disabilities. Now this right here is the fetal alcohol, and I know it's hard to see, but I'm going to give you some a little bit more I'm sorry. This is Fragile X. Okay, so you're going to see a normal head structure, but you're going to see a broad forehead, elongated face, big ears, crossed eyes. You're going to get really hyperextensible joints. Okay, an indentation in the chest, mitral valve prolapse, which is heart problems, flat feet, low muscle tone, at 10% have seizures. And this is what they mean by Fragile X. There's this little like like if you have your coffee cup and there's like a little like weak spot in that, right? So that's what that is. It's like that particular chromosome has a fragile piece, and it's just, and so this is kind of, I know it's hard to see, but you guys can look it up a little bit more on Google. But see how the ears are long and there's a wide nose and the eyes and like it's a little bit flatter here. You know, this is not too different than fetal alcohol. So you can tell when there's an abnormality that happens when a baby is being created in the mother's womb, that it happens to come out and it's a certain phenotype. Okay, hyperactivity, tactile defensiveness, which means sensory processing, gross motor delays, autistic-like behaviors. Again, so uh, if a child's looking autistic or acting autistic, they can do a blood test and see if it's Fragile X. If it comes back that there is a Fragile X, then it's Fragile X. If it comes back and it's not Fragile X, then it's autism. Okay. But it could also be fetal alcohol syndrome, which is heartbreaking. Okay. These kids struggle harder than anybody else, and it's really, really sad because none of it was their fault. Okay. Small eye openings, smooth filitrium. This right here is really, really flat. Thin upper lip. See, I have it too. I told my mom, you were drinking in the 70s. And she said, yeah, when I was in labor with you, I went to the hospital. He said, you're not ready. Go home and have a glass of wine. So maybe I'm a little bit crazy because of that. But in the 70s, that was normal. But now we know that it's very, very toxic for children. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Characteristics. There's different causes and there's different reasons. Again, there's similarities in the characteristics. Okay. Again, cognition, adaptive behavior, and need for supports. Those are the three hits in this chapter. Cognition, adaptive behavior, need for supports. Okay. Now, again, going back to the IQ levels that we talked about before, and this is a little bit easier to read. When you have a child with mild intellectual disability, again, this is most of the cases here, right? They can be independent. They can be pretty understandable when you're talking to them. Reading and writing can be okay. Ability to work, they could probably do something. Maybe like that person that we saw in the video. Social skills are pretty normal. Physical problems pretty rare. Etiology means how do we figure out where it came from? Do we know where it came from? Remember, we said that we don't know all the reasons, and so sometimes we'll find out the reasons here, maybe not. Okay. Academic skill is about 6th grade here or higher. Okay. And again, the moderate ones, if they kind of stop at 2nd to 3rd grade, this is where we're at with a moderate intellectual disability. And then severe and profound, they usually cannot even be educated. I mean, they're really, 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 really impaired. And so again, so you can kind of have an idea. Maybe you're applying this to somebody that you know or someone in your family, but it's okay. It works. It's a pretty good, easy breakdown. Now, this is our book. This is the general characteristics. Look at intellectual functioning, adaptive behavior, and then these are the different areas where there might be some challenges. Learning, understanding, daily living, participation, learning from experience, remembering, social skills, health, reasoning, solving problems, right? So again, almost childlike in a way, right? Even though they become adults, childlike in a way. The supports can be different from different sources. It can be informal or formal, but again, they might need supports daily, frequently, infrequent, or they might need a formal network of support, like if somebody hooks up with an agency like Easter Seals or Goodwill Industries, things like that. Or they just might need a little bit of help making food or going to their doctor's appointments. That's going to be friends, family, neighbors, things like that. Again, our books talks about those challenges from before, but the solutions are the systems of personalized supports. Again, it has to be personal for each kid or each person, excuse me, they're not all kids, right? Networks of family, friends, and coworkers and social services. So again, even with challenges, there are solutions and supports. Okay, this is very sweet. Now, before I play this, this is the Special Olympics, but they're going to talk about South Carolina because that was a couple years ago. Ours was most recently here in Los Angeles. It was the International Special Olympics, so that was really cool to see. And just to add a personal note, my auntie, she was a gold medalist in bowling, so she was fantastic. She was a bowler. Again, the Midwest runs in my family quite deep. Yay! Oh, so sweet. Oh wow. And that's going to be actually part of our journal assignment. I'm pointing you towards the Volunteer Center of Orange County and see, I'm not requiring volunteering, but we'll talk about that later. I just want to see, as college students, how we can be stewards of all those things, inclusions, and champion those who need help. Okay. The context. Let's look at context. That means that let's look at this in relationship to our society. Now, I'm going to give you a heads up here. Treatment of people like this, I think most of us know, treatment has not always been very kind. And in fact, I have some interesting graphics in here, and it's almost embarrassing. It's almost humiliating to really talk about how we've treated people like with intellectual disabilities. Not great. And in fact, when we talk about civil rights, the civil rights of this group are still being marginalized. I mean, we've got race rights, and I know that there's always a lot of tension, but we also have gay rights, but this group is still fighting, fighting, fighting. It's almost like there's still groups that are fighting the good fight, even though this group has been around for quite some time. So I'm just giving you a heads up. There's some some sensitive parts here coming up, but we have to look at the history to know where we're going, right? Again, the stigma that's associated here is still a barrier. Again, that one girl who said she's hopefully going to get married, that's a big deal. And I know we have a TV show out about kids with intellectual disabilities, and I think it's fantastic. But there's still, that's just part of the process to get inclusion and acceptance more common, okay? Again, there's always still bias, but there's so much that these people can do. Let's not underestimate them because they can show us a thing or two, right? Again, language is key. If we are talking about people that they're dumb or they're less than or they're stupid or they're just babies, if we talk down to them, we're never going to really support equality, right? But again, they have relationships. They want to go to college. Even on the TV show, this one girl, she owns a business. She's killing it. But this is a quote from Nelson Mandela. Only 50 years ago, persons with intellectual disabilities were scorned, isolated, and neglected. Today, they are able to attend school, become employed, and assimilate into their local community. I think it's lovely. Yeah, I think that's really great. This is the weird one that I found. This is called Haunted Files, and it was from the APA, American Psychological Association. So this is not just somebody's, right? Steps in mental development, where they stumble the limit of each developmental type. Ah, this is crazy. This is where they would literally call people an idiot. That person has an idiot level or a low-grade imbecile level. I mean, wow. Medium imbecile, high-grade imbecile, or moron. This is how people were talked about. So I'm really pleased that our language does not include that anymore. It's heartbreaking. This next one is is sad too. But again, I'm pushing you guys as college students because we can't ignore that this stuff. Look at superior intelligence. Now, this was not measured. This was just arbitrarily. Commissioned officers, non-commissioned officers, Negro officers. Oh, so if you're an officer, you must be smart because all these people are smart. Privates, all these are the people in these countries. Oh, not too smart. Oh, 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 oh. And the lowest one, Southern American Negro. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Ugh, gosh, it's just amazing how people were just categorized in a very negative way, which is really interesting. Okay. Again, it used to, yeah, imbecile, moron, feeble-minded, mental retardation, retard. It came from the word retardate. It's like old Latin or old Greek. And so retardate, I mean, is the technical term, but we don't use the word retard anymore. Okay? We use the term intellectual disability. Stop using the R word. It's like the N word. Don't use it. You don't. They might use it to you like flip the script and it's like how we used to say queer was bad. Now people are like, yeah, I own that word. Um, if they want to use it, they want to use it. We don't get to use it. Okay. The new term is intellectual disability. Thank you. Stop discriminating. Okay. And remember, when you judge someone based on a diagnosis, a person is not their diagnosis. You miss out on their abilities, beauty, and uniqueness. Now, some of you notice that I'm a big girl, right? If I was like somebody said to me, well, you're fat and that's all you are. I'd be like, oh, that's interesting. I'm a lot more than just fat, right? So again, it's the same thing when we look at somebody based on their diagnosis, we miss all the good stuff, okay? Again, let's really look at our language. And this is the video from our local girl, Lauren Potter. Let me see if I scroll out. It might be a little bit better. Let's see if I can get here. Okay. We'll talk later about one of the videos I show in the low vision and blindness chapter is a gentleman with low vision and blindness. And he talks about if you want to steal from somebody who's blind, that's like a lazy crook, right? If you want to bully somebody who has disabilities, that's like that's a lazy bully, right? I'm not saying any bullying is okay, but really think about it. If it's that, really, we don't even need to go there, really. Now, eugenics is a really interesting term. There was this big part about 100 years ago where people were kind of coming up with these stories. It was almost like a witch hunt. It was almost like, well, that person's different, and if they're different, then they're going to make more different people, and if they're different, then they're going to ruin life for the rest of us. Sound common of some of the political speaks that are going on currently. Again, it's called eugenics, and again, that was kind of like the first type of protection because they were saying those people are making up stories. So it was a false threat, and these people aren't a threat. So it was a worldwide movement. It was kind of interesting. It was a really interesting piece there. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in Origins. And again, this has always been a part of human history. I mean, even in biblical times, there was like the leper colony, and then there's people, even in the medieval times, there were like the jesters and things like that. And then we've moved a lot away from that, but the dignity and respect is not always offered to them. So we can still do better. Okay. Let's see. There we go. Okay. Again, it's not new. There's been help, formalized help in modern society for about 200 years. I began in Europe. The book talks about the La Enfant Sauvage. It was a child who literally was left in the woods in France, and then they found him, and then they did the studies on how to reintegrate somebody with social skills. But he was intellectually disabled because he was in the woods for so long. And then some of those studies came to America, and then the book really talks about uh, Edward or Eduard Seguin was the first president of the AAID, which is really trying to get people together, like professionals together, to be aware and working with people like this. And then again, there's these different people who really made a difference here, and I really like how they talk about the Kennedys and the Shrivers because they are consistent, like one large family who's made a huge difference in this community. So here, when some studies or some care came to America, children were automatically placed in institutions. And again, I told you my auntie was born in the 60s. She was not raised by her parents. I mean, yes, my grandparents raised her, but only on the weekends. It was like she was in group homes. I mean, it was just common that back then that, oh, I'm sorry, you have a child with Down syndrome, so we must remove them from your care. I mean, you can't care for them. Now, yes, I understand my grandparents were older, but that didn't mean they couldn't care for her. So it was really interesting. And then about the time that everything was getting deinstitutionalized, they were needing some help because they were a little bit old. So now it's not very common to have a student or a child with intellectual disabilities in an institution. So it's more uncommon than common. But when before, they just took your kids away and they just assumed that you couldn't handle them and they couldn't be in modern society. Now, again, with inclusion in the schools, and we'll talk about that in a sec, inclusion is great in the schools, but including them in daily life and everyday life is still, we're working through that. We're going to have some challenges there. Now, normalization, right? I don't always like the word normal, but normalization is just giving people the opportunity to have a normal experience in life. And dignity of risk. This is a big term. I really like this because, I see a lot of, even my grandparents, they were very protective of my aunt, and sometimes they wouldn't let her take risks. And for her to get a job and be independent, it was very, very hard for them. But she thrived. She really she blossomed. And letting people just take chances in life and in love and experiences, it's part of the being human. We can't protect them from everything. Now, this is a little bit more of the history here. Our book even starts before 1900, so I think it's really interesting, and I want to show you about here. They were talking about mental defectiveness there, and this right here, look at, there is inmates of this institution are commonly referred to as children regardless of their ages. They're just, the words were just so mean. Look at this. They wanted to sterilize people. Well, here's the thing. Some genetic issues here, they're already sterile. Again, it was so crowded here in some of the institutions. It just is heartbreaking. Overcrowdedness. Look at this. Slaves or patients. Ugh. And then here's the eugenics talking about these threats that weren't really even threats to our society. And again, Eisenhower here passes the first legislation established to provide funds for university training programs in the field of special ed, which is really cool. Okay. And then John F. Kennedy did a lot of supports here. In fact, our book talks about in the very first page, it says, page 225, that the intro, the intellectual disabilities that I showed you, that presidential seal. I actually looked it up, and it wasn't John F. Kennedy, even though he was great in being helpful. It was Lyndon B. Johnson, the person who took over, that did a lot of this setup as well. So John F. Kennedy started this movement, but we've then progress through that. Okay. Look at their Special Olympics. Look at this. Someone said right here, the best way I can put it, it was like being in prison. That's not fair, right? Just because you have an intellectual disability. Institutional census drops to less than 50,000. So, and that's in our nation. So if kids are profound or severe, there's still some that are institutions, and that's okay. Okay. But again, look at this. We have a lot more supports and a lot more abilities for them to participate in society with everyone. Okay. And every person deserves the chance to reach his or her full potential. Yay. And again, what's the prevalence? How common is this? Okay. Is this decreasing? Yeah, actually it is. Okay. But the problem here, the area that we face some challenges here is that they're not in the gen ed class as much as they could be. So there's a disparity there. Okay. Now, this is a weird concept I want you to understand here. This is outlined 9.7, page 240 to 241. About 5% of the population is categorized with intellectual disabilities. However, 1% are getting IEPs under intellectual disabilities. Why? There's a bunch of different reasons. Okay, one is that there are other categories that might be that might provide more support. So, speech and language, learning disabilities, things like that. Another part is that some parents don't approve of the assessment. They don't want an assessment. They don't want the categorization. But sometimes these students are going to be placed in autism as well. So again, that Fragile X student can look autistic. So maybe they're in autism. Okay. But the rate of inclusion is still very low. So less than 20% are in the gen ed classroom more than 80% of the day, that's very, very low. When we have autistic children or children with autism spectrum disorders, more of them are going to be in that classroom. So the disparity is still there, and we still have a lot of work to do that. Again, here's the prevalence. Okay, we talked about speech or language is big, even at primary or secondary. This is a big group. Learning disabilities is a big group, but here, look at this. Intellectual disability, about 7%. So I said 5 earlier, but 5 to 7 is pretty normal. But 7%, it's pretty low. Okay. Again, some of these students might show up here, might show up here, might show up here, multiple disabilities. Okay. Maybe show up here. So again, could be these kinds of things too. So for example, if you have somebody who has an intellectual disability and they're deaf, well, maybe they're going to be under this one right here. So again, miscategorization is not always bad, but that inclusion rate being so low, not good. So here is the prevalence going down for intellectual disability, and at the same time, autism is going up, right? Not good. But that's just how, good for intellectual disability, but autism is on the rise. And then this is the different educational environments. So look here, when students are younger, between 6 and 11, which is, K through or 1 through 5 maybe, they're in a regular class, a typical gen ed class. Okay. As they get older, less of them are in a gen ed class because again, some of their peers are becoming more mature, but these children with intellectual disabilities are not. So, and then I guess they get older, the regular classroom, right? So you can see these specialized supports down here, home or hospital or residential facility, these go up as people get older. So that's how it works. Okay. I like this one. My name is Jessica. I'm in grade 5. People say I'm disruptive in class. People say that I hold the other kids back. People say that I take up all the teacher's time, but none of those people are in my class. Right? So be careful what we're saying. That's probably not true. Okay. So that gives you a little bit of idea of what to look for here. Okay. Early intervention, always important. Always important. Intervene at 3 months or 3 years. 3 months. Intervene at 3 years or 13 years. 3 years, right? So the earlier the better. Okay. Some people can learn skills very early that will help minimize that intellectual disability, and maybe they would be mild, but they have better skills. Okay. And yes, early intervention helps because remember, And when they're little, we can provide that language-rich environment. We can have language-sensitive teaching. And then in the school, structured frameworks, RTI and CBM, all those things. If you don't remember what those are, look them up. Okay, look at how cute she is. Give them opportunities, okay? Now this one is hard to read here. I'll read it as well. Unlike preschool program for children at risk in which the goal is to prevent intellectual disability from occurring, programs for infants in preschools who are already identified with intellectual disability are designed to help them achieve a high as cognitive level as possible. So if they're already identified, sometimes you'll know when a child is born or even before they're born. You can do a genetic test and see if they have Down syndrome. If they're already identified, then we want to get them to the highest cognitive level as possible. And getting that brain, that early brain working best as possible is the way to go. And the book talks about tips for identifying high quality preschools. Absolutely. You need to have typical children in with children who are different so they each can learn from each other, right? Typicals can learn how to be inclusive, and children who are identified with disabilities can learn to be around typical developed kids. It's the ideal way that it should be set up. Now, during the school years, okay, again, they have access to the gen ed curriculum, but again, we're still working on getting that number up. And then when they get older, they can become a little bit more independent and advocate for themselves. So sometimes our students like this, they don't need to know the Common Core as much as they need to know functional skills, like reading, writing, and math that happens to help us in the environment. So if a student can do their multiplication, that's great, but if they can't write down a phone number, or they can't remember a phone number, or they can't get change for $1, that's not good. So we need to give them a very functional level of knowledge so they can be successful, not just in the classroom, but in life. So sometimes, again, the teaching environment might happen in the community, like we saw that coffee cart in the previous chapters, but again, these are called functional curriculum, okay? Teaching skills needed for daily living, right? Again, we all know people who just didn't quite learn how to fold laundry or manage money or talk to people or figure out a bus schedule, right? These are some things that we all could learn, right? And I wanted to share this with you. This is a great resource, teacherspayteachers.com, okay? Teachers make stuff and then they sell it to other teachers, and I think it's great, right? It's like a little side business for teachers, but at the same time, why reinvent the wheel if this is a really good skill? So here what we would do is we will give them like scenarios, right? And they can learn from here how to mail something, how to get help at a store, how to go to a restaurant, how to do money, right? It's fantastic. So by the way, on Teachers Pay Teachers, there's lots of free stuff too. So go on there too, really cool stuff. And just know that functional curriculum is a big part of, what kids need to learn, students need to learn. And self-determination is really making determinations for themselves, obviously, and helping them empower themselves that way. Self-advocacy is really standing up for one's own needs and goals. And transition, this is a big deal because some of these students will go to college and some will not. So let's look at what we can do to support that. Okay. So again, some are going to want to go to school and some are going to want to just go to work. Okay. But I want to show you this. The book really outlines that only 7% of students with people with intellectual disabilities live independently. That's low. 83% are unemployed. They live with families and they just kind of hang out. That doesn't seem, if there's so many hidden gifts, why can't we get them out there, right? Only 52% any sort of training. Sometimes they go to classes or it's called day programs or things like that. But many want to work and participate. So let's help empower them and ask them what they want. What are their goals in life? So I like that video at the beginning, and there were more alike than different because you got to see personal goals in there, which is fantastic. Again, sometimes family members just really shield these children and they just assume that they can't do anything, but they can. We just need to know who they are and ask them, what do you want to do, right? A job coach is really great because it'll teach job skills. And so look at these they're working on a computer. I don't think I could work on a computer like that. That's awesome. Look at going to college, working. Look how happy he is, right? Now, supported employment is it's coaching and sometimes there's somebody there with them. I was at IKEA and I saw somebody standing right next to somebody else who was working. And it was really kind of cool because the government helps subsidize the company. That kid, I'm sorry, that's the person with intellectual disabilities has the dignity of working like everybody else, and somebody else gets to help them. So I think it's a win-win-win. Yeah. Okay. And the future, what does the future hold? Okay. So we talk about technology that can help a student, but also help not prevent, but yeah, identify early and maybe some technology can also help get the word out on how to prevent. Okay. Okay. Sometimes technology can be a little bit difficult. If this person is mildly impaired, they should be fine. But if somebody is profound or deeply impaired, technology might not help them. iPads can be hard sometimes, and so iPad doesn't solve every problem, right? But it just depends on the person. Just get to know them and see what they need. And technology doesn't always mean high tech. It can mean low tech too. We talked about that. And this is kind of cool. There's alternative keyboards, word processing, audiobooks that helps, audio recorders, things like that. So anything that works, use it. This is a cool thing. This is like, it's not dialing. It's just for a person who knows that they want to contact another person, but numbers aren't their best part. So it just is like a picture of mom and sister and brother and look at emergency, fire, police, that kind of thing. So it presses a button and automatically dials. So this is a medium tech type device that would help people like that. And look at that. Hey, learn computers. Let's go for it, man. Now, eBuddies is really cool, and we'll talk about that in a sec. There's a video. But this was another program created by one of the Kennedy Shrivers, and again, really happy that we've got this going. And I'm going to encourage you guys to look at that too, especially with the journal assignment. I won't play this whole thing because it's a long video and it's a big song, but I'll play part of it. It's very sweet. And I think it's Cher singing. I'm not familiar with the song. No. Best buddies. Just hanging out with people, just spending quality time together is important. Just kids being kids, not hidden, not treated differently. Okay. All right. So you guys can watch the end of it. I also put that at the end under resources. So very, very sweet. So again, it's a great program, but there's also an email program part of Best Buddies. So don't feel the need that if you're super busy as a college student and maybe you're like a mom and all that, and you're working full time, just know that it's an email program. If you're on your email, like maybe you could still be a Best Buddy. So look into that. Okay, I'm going to challenge you with that. So prevention efforts. Prevention is always important, but it's really, really hard to get through to people sometimes, right? It's frustrating. But fully protecting children from toxins. Poverty is one of those issues that exposes more kids to toxins and things like that. So it's kind of a, it's not just a one question, one answer. It's a very nebulous question, a very nebulous answer. So again, we have a lot of work to do in this area. Okay, hold on. Going slow. All right. Is there a link between the identification of specific causes and the development and implementation of preventive measures? Is there a link? Yes. Again, environmental issues and genetic issues. Is there a link? Like, can we prevent environmental issues? Hopefully. Hopefully. And genetic issues? No, not really. That's just part of nature, right? So let's focus on what we can prevent. Shaken baby and fetal alcohol. Ugh, it's heartbreaking. Again, these are the different types under fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. FES, ARBD, FAE, ARND. Again, this is just an intro. If you want more information, you're welcome to go ahead and look at that. It is very heartbreaking. But some of you are now learning about this that this might be an explanation for some things that you might have noticed in your family. And again, it's avoidable, but if the child's already born, then we just have to help them with as many supports as possible. So now this is going to give you a really clear picture here, and I really like this, right? Again, this is where you're going to see the primary disabilities. They're things that are really challenging to them. Mental stamina, impulsivity, let's see, and the inability to see another person's perspective, inability to recognize social cues, right? That looks like autism, right? So it's interesting. So some kids may be miscategorized, right? I don't want to say diagnosed, but it can look at this impulsivity and poor judgment. That could look like ADHD, right? It could look like anything. And again, there's no genetic marker for fetal alcohol. It's just, it was during the development, the mom was drinking. Now, there's some secondary challenges, right? Maybe they just can't live alone, or they just don't do great in school. Mental health, incarceration, yeah. Can't hold a job, drug and alcohol problems, trouble with the law, disrupted school. So it's, if you look at everybody who qualifies under here, and even these over here, could it be fetal alcohol? Yeah, it's a lot more common than we think. Sadly but truly, this is exactly what it is. Normal brain of a 6-week-old baby. Brain of baby the same age with fetal alcohol. How do you think that child can function with a brain like that? That's heartbreaking. Okay, and another one, environmental lead poisoning used to be a big, big push. Our paint used to have lead in it, and sometimes there's still lead paint in toys made in China, so we have to be very careful on that. Again, if kids eat that, their brain, they become intellectually disabled. So can we avoid those things? Yes. How do we avoid those things? Well, we have to give more knowledge to people so they know to avoid those things. But if the child doesn't have any toys and they just can afford the ones from China, it's hard. It's really hard. I understand. So more awareness and more prevention would always be helpful. And that's pretty much it. So let's do this. Let's do the review. Okay. 3 areas of concern, remember: intellectual functioning, adaptive skills, and need for supports. It could be mild, most are mild, to severe. There are genetic causes and environmental causes. There's common characteristics, and then the different levels of supports that are needed can come from formal or informal sources. Again, this is a very unique group of people, but again, they've come a long way, but there's more challenges to overcome here. Again, we need to really look at our language, offer respect, dignity of risk, offer more opportunities to be in like the general population, and just learn and live with like everyone else. Okay. Now, again, in school, there's some challenges there too, but we're seeing more and more students included. Yeah, I don't see very many, but I do see more students included than before. So again, and then when we talk about as they get older, giving them a functional curriculum, right? And then when they go into transition services, it's self-determination, transition to adult life, and it's supported employment. That's the key here. Okay. And future perspectives is like technology can help, but if we can also use technology for prevention, we're in a good place. Okay. Now the IRIS activity talks about transition, and I only just picked one. And I really want you guys to look at what it takes for a student to be transitioned, and when they have input and what their empowerment looks like. So I only have you answering one question under the assessment tab. Explain why self-determination is important for students with disabilities. Um, but again, look through the different pieces of the module, watch the videos, and it'll really kind of give you um, almost almost a glimpse on what it's like on the other side. People who really need that setup. Okay, remember due dates and the journal assignment. Okay, I'm going to have you go to the link for 10C. It used to be called the Volunteer Center, but there's a lot of resources on there. So I put you on the volunteer page, but if you poke around, there's like diversion programs for teens who may have an issue with drugs or alcohol. There's programs there for seniors. There's small business help. It's really cool. It's a really awesome website. Just one word of caution, loading the volunteer calendar can be slow, so just be aware of that. And then the websites that it suggested was the Museum of Disability History, Center for Disease Control, and the REACH program. This is actually a certificate program here for students with intellectual disabilities, and it helps them really just prepare for life. CDC is great for everything. I will nod back to the CDC a lot. They're in charge like of everything medical in our country. And then the videos we saw this one, this one, and then sport. This one is about sports. So you guys can go ahead and look through that and read through that. And the agencies and organizations and professional journals. I didn't zoom into each one this time because they're in the book. But also I've provided, in addition to the lecture and the video and the PDFs and the zipped files, I'm also including the outline. So I create an outline and then I create the lecture. So that might be helpful for you. So I went ahead and included that in the folder on Blackboard. Okay, quiz 9 is due by Sunday. And then we're going to go from chapter 9 next week to chapter 10, and then we'll have an exam. So again, I'm working on a study guide and getting all the course terms up, updating Quizlet. I'll get that quiz posted hopefully later today. And we've got a lot of things going on. So you guys are doing a great job. Keep it up. We're right in the middle of this unit here, and unit 2, and then we're going to keep going. Unit 3, pretty awesome. I'm really excited about that too. So let's keep on keeping on. We're almost halfway through. So again, this is Professor Laney. I will see you in the virtual world.